Hello, Charlie TCG here, and welcome back to Looking Ahead, the series where I break down and analyze the meta, what's happening over in Japan, and how about impact Taiwan. Today is quite an exciting one. We've got some new reveals for our Paradox Rift set, and some of them could potentially be game-breaking and meta-defining. So I'm really excited to talk to you exactly how I feel like they could really fit in the meta. We've also got to break down exactly what is the BDIF in Japan, looking at results that happened over this weekend and some of the deck archetypes as well. We can really see, is Charizard, Chien-Pao or Giratina one of the top archetypes over in the meta right there? I'm really excited to see how the format is developing, and I'm really excited to see how it will actually play out in the Yokohama Championships happening this weekend, really kicking off the Japanese circuit by storm. So let's jump into exactly what are these new cards revealed. So we saw quite a few of the reveals from the Raging Surf, as well as the themed battle decks, which are coming out for the Mewtwo and Skeledirge. And honestly, they are really, really exciting. We have Hooper EX, which is a Terra Pokemon. I'm really liking how Pokemon is kind of leaning into the different types. And this one isn't exactly the strongest one, but has a really interesting tech option in likes of Darkrai. For 2 target energies, 50 damage, for each energy attached to your opponent's Pokemon in play. Now you can easily get this accelerated with the likes of Energy Switch and Galarian Moltres V, but I think the only thing I don't like about it is you can't use Dark Patch to it. It can kind of be a bit of a vulnerable situation. And yes, it can really help in the likes of the Arceus and Miraidon matchups, but it could be really a bit of a hindrance to really get that set up. And generally, it all goes on the opponent. They can really play around it if they're being careful about it. But honestly, interesting card as well. But Go EX is a card which has had a lot of traction. I've already seen a couple of videos about the deck working, and honestly, it's pretty powerful. It has an amazing ability, which is draw a card, but if it's in the action spot, you draw 2 cards. If you think of the likes of Slurper from Phantom Forces, it had exactly the same ability and was incredibly well played until Shaman EX was printed. But it's an amazing draw factor as well on a stage 1 Pokemon. But we're not using it for the draw factor. No. We're using it for its attack. And its attack is incredible. For a single metal energy, 50 damage, and then discard any number of basic energies from your hand, and there's 50 damage times the amount of energy cards you discard in this way. Now, this is insane. If you think about it, if you discard 6 energies, you're doing 300 damage. 7, you're doing that magic 350 and KOing everything. Go EX is a beast, and I really, really like that. Now, if you think of the likes of Chien-Pao, and that's all energy reliant on getting from discard power, attachment to Pokemon, it's super, super easy to get that. The likes of Superior Energy Retrievals, Energy Retrieval itself, and even the likes of Clara, and you can even use Lady, and the endorsement letter, which can get you energy cards if your opponent's been discarded. You can even use Fog Crystal to get energies. There are so many ways to get energy cards as well. Guaranteed probably in this set, we might in fact see a way to get those energy cards from a deck. So I'm really excited to see how it's going to develop. I think this could in fact be a tier 2, maybe even a tier 1.5 archetype. Go EX is really, really powerful. Team on the likes of Curlier as a really good draw factor. You can use potentially draw 4 cards if you've got 2 Golden Goes on the bench, 1 in the active spot. Really, really easy to set up. Only 1 energy. You can easily use Raihan as well. There's so many ways around this Golden Go EX, and generally think it's an incredibly powerful archetype. I'm really excited to see how it's going to develop. Natu is another incredibly good stage 1 Pokemon. It has an ability which you get to attach a basic energy card, psychic energy, from your hand to one of your bench Pokemon, and if you do, draw 2 cards. Yes, this is Underworld Door, Shadow Rider, Calyrax's VMAX ability on a stage 1 single prize Pokemon. They've done Shadow Rider incredibly dirty, and honestly, this Natu is incredibly powerful. As Team talks, it could be used in the Psychic Box. It can also be used in Giratina. It's our 3rd different way to play Giratina, like a turbo version. Constantly using these Natu gets some good draw factors in as well. Doesn't get show up by Path to the Peak. You can easily accelerate energies to your Giratinas, and you can easily get those attacks going off turn 2. I generally think this is an incredibly good archetype. I'm really excited to see how it's going to be developed. Stage 1 energy acceleration cards are really powerful. Even right now in the format, likes of Marib and in previous formats of Malamar and Electric, but it's having a draw factor and from the hand, generally really, really powerful card. And Volcanion as well is another really good Pokemon. Give me huge flashbacks to the Steam Up and Power Heater Volcanion from Steam Siege. 20 damage and attach 2 fire energies to your bench Pokemon in any way you like. I think this is really, really powerful. I really like how it works. And we have the likes of Rapidash and Skeledirge EX, Pokemon that can discard fire energies to deal more damage. You can energy accelerate the energies you just discarded and potentially doing these big one-hit KO capability. Skeledirge EX is, now we have this Volcanion, is potentially looking like a really strong archetype. And I'm really excited to see this. It could, in fact, go from being like a tier, like do not play, to a potentially a tier 2 with the likes of Volcanion, Skeledirge EX, both of them as well. Really, really excited to see these new cards. Really excited to see how we're going to develop in the meta once we get all of Raging Surf by the end of the month, and seeing how it's going to play out in the likes of the City Leagues, when I'm going to talk to you about that at the end of this month as well. So let's jump into exactly what is the meta looking like over Japan. So you guys need to really like the meta breakdown, which I did last week, and I'm kind of talking to you about it until we get the likes of City League results, which hopefully should be starting next week. So we can see here that the best deck is Lost Zone Tina, being 50% of the meta with a really good win rate. It's actually only just beaten Charizard by 3 decks, which is honestly shows you how close it is with Charizard being 14.5%. Charizard is definitely coming up there being a lot more popular deck. It isn't just one of those really strong archetypes, which is like, oh, it's new, I'm going to play it. It's actually kind of becoming one of the strongest decks right now over in Japan. Chien-Pao is overtaken with Lugia by being 9.8, Gardevoir being 9.7, Lugia being 9.4. So yeah, the top 5 archetypes, all of them are very, very close in numbers. Miraidon, Mew, and Lost Box are just down there, but being 6.2, 5.4, and 5.2 respectively. All of them have a really positive win rate, except Miraidon, which has a 44% win rate. Honestly, I think Miraidon has a bit lower win rate because even though it's a part of the peak deck, it relies so much on energy acceleration at the early games. And if your opponent pretty much KOs any of the Flaffines in pretty much turn 2 or even turn 3, and you don't get your setup, Miraidon can really just fall flat. Path to Peak, yes, it's really good, but you also shut yourself off as well. I think it's a really accurate representation of exactly how the meta is evolving. Lost Zone Tina, I would probably say, is BDIF again in Japan. It's kind of been that BDIF for about 6 months now. It's been always out there being one of the top archetypes. Never really performing too well over in the tournaments, going to get rid of the top 4 placement. I think Arctina was one of the best placing Giratina's once time. But generally, I think Charizard could in fact have a shot at Yokohama Championships here. I think it's a really good representation of exactly how the decks are archetyping, going over nearly 3,000 decks, and this is exactly what everyone's playing here. You've seen a win rate as well. Honestly, I'm really excited to see exactly how the meta is evolving. Not too much, but we're already seeing that Lugia drops a little bit, but the top 5 have constantly staying in about that 10% range. So let's look at some of the deck archetypes as well. So looking at Lost Zone Tina, it's not exactly that surprising here. We're seeing the energy's about the same. We're seeing the likes of Free Path to the Peak, which is about normal. But what I like in this is they're playing one copy of Switch. Switch, I think, is really powerful because, yes, you have Switch card, which is really good to go through all your basic Pokemon. But when you have a Giratina V-Star in the active spot, you can only really get out of it with the likes of a Skate Rope or potentially even a Jet Energy on the bench. So having that extra Switch card is really, really key. And I generally like that as well. But one thing which makes this list really stand out is, yes, the Lost Vacuum, which is kind of become a bit normal, but it has 2 Roxannes and 1 Iona. I love, as I mentioned multiple times, having 2 to 3 Disruptor supporter cards in Lost Tina. Because the opponent might potentially see you go, oh, you've played an Iona, you've got rid of a Roxanne, I'm safe, there's no good be hand disruption. Then all of a sudden, when they're taking the last few prizes and go, boom, Roxanne, they go down to 2 cards, they can't really get anything. Lost Tina does their stuff, gets that win, and generally that's why I think this deck is so powerful. Having potentially 2 to 3 disruptive supporter cards, which will really disrupt your opponent's hand, is exactly how Lost Tina can really keep up with the meta to become one of the strongest archetypes right now. I'm also seeing especially in the cups over here, people are kind of cutting Manaphy. They're kind of like not respecting Greninja as much because they're like, okay, you can KO the Comfys, you can KO the Sableye, but you don't need to worry about the Crown Ransom, blah, 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 blah. So I'm generally seeing that over for us, but they're cutting it for the likes of a 4th Giratina. But honestly, this is a really exciting, really disruptive Giratina, which generally could be up there as the best deck right now in the format. And looking at Lost Zard, which is the deck which is like this new version of Sable Zard here, and it is still performing pretty well over in the cups and challenges happening for us as well. It's very much a simple way of how you play Lost Box. You play High Council Comfy, lots of switching cards, you play your choruses, but you have Charizard as a really good attacker in the late game. You're not playing the likes of Drapion, you have Charizard, which can really help in the likes of really hitting hard. It's really difficult for Pokemon to get to hit for 330 damage in the early game. So you can just like steamroll them in the early games by having this real big pressure of Charizard. I love the Echoing Horn in this, which works really well for like Sableye. I love the Raihan in this. I like the Super. I love the Mirage Gate. So you don't need just the Charizard Infernal Fandango ability. You have Mirage Gate as well, which can help accelerate any of your energies out in play and can get your Radiant Charizard out as early as possible. Really, really exciting, really, really unique list of Charizard. And I've seen quite a lot of people play this version, so potentially this could be the way of how we play Charizard. We'll see exactly how that works out in the regionals we have in this weekend, as well as the Yokohama Championships. But there is just always a classic Arczard, which is doing very, very well. Definitely still the more popular version of Charizard over there. The Pidgeot to get any cards you want to have. The Arceus is really good sort of attacker in the early game as well, gain any 2 cards potential, and obviously Charizard as well being your main attack and energy acceleration in the deck. I like the likes of Choice Bell, not playing the likes of any way to kind of like get those big one-hit KOs on Chien-Pao or Miraidon in the early game. Potentially you have to use like your Radiant Charizard and load out all those of energies. But honestly, it's a really interesting, unique list. I think Jack is becoming one of the most key staples in these Charizard decks because there are so many evolved Pokemon, you can easily get them out as long as you have at least one rare candy. Really interesting list. I really like how Charizard is starting to evolve, and this is becoming like the 2 different archetypes of how you play it. Another deck which is not really found its right footing is Chien-Pao. There are so many different ways to play it. Are you cross-switcher? Are you not cross-switcher? Are you Palkia? Are you Arceus? Are you Bibarel or Pidgeot, or both of them? And this list here is becoming more the normal I've seen over in Japan. The likes of Palkia instead of over Arceus is really interesting choice here because it's a way for you to go around the likes of, to get the superior energy retrievals, or importantly, like you can kind of use it in the early games to have a really strong attacker by having 280 HP. You also if you can't get, like I said, you can't get that the energy retrievals, you can use its ability as well, but you are still weak to Path of the Peak. But I really like having Bibarel. Playing Bibarel in Chien-Pao has kind of become a must now, pure on how destructive the format has kind of become here. I like the cross switches. I'm kind of like leaning back into playing cross switches right now. I think cross switch is definitely the right way to play Chien-Pao, having that switching out, having the likes with canceling clone, but you're not getting the big wombo combo pieces like you were with the likes of the Arceus Pidgeot build. But Pidgeot is definitely becoming a huge decline in the Chien-Pao archetypes. Not really too much to change here. There are these 3 superior energy retrievals, which I'm not a big fan of. Potentially you could cut an energy for one of them. I like the Super Rod though in it. I think if you're playing Pokestop, you have to play Super Rod because say you get rid of your 1/1 Bibarel, or you get rid of really, really key Pokemon cards, just shuffling back in is exactly a must because you can't afford to play Clara. I think this list is really, really powerful, really, really strong. I'm really excited to see how Chien-Pao is going to develop and if it will in fact make its name for itself this weekend. Gardevoir EX is still really, really strong and one of the best archetypes right now. Utilizing the likes of Mew EX is really good, having that draw factor in the kind of like really, really late game by drawing up TF3, but it's attacks so you can use any sort of attacks on the opponent's active Pokemon. I really think it's key because you can use Radiant Greninja as well as Tina and V-Star attacks, which is really, really strong here. And you play multiple bosses and power pads, so you're really okay with it. The new Moonlight Stadium, figure out the extra healing factor in there. The Mirage Step Curlier, I've become a huge Mirage Step Curlier stan. Just kind of like getting your potential board state of having like 2 Rolts and 4 Curliers turn 2 is super, super easy. I really like this list here. I think it's really consistent. And honestly, I potentially will be testing this version when it comes out to 151 is legal for us. Mew EX is definitely a game-changing card. Speaking of game-changing cards with Mew EX, Lugia V-Star has become like the more home for this Mew EX. This list here, I found really interesting. It doesn't play 3 different types of stadium cards, and all of them are 2 each. But what makes it really interesting is there are 2 copies of Path to the Peak in this deck. Yes, 2 copies of Path to the Peak, which kind of sounds counterintuitive in the likes of a Lugia V-Star deck. But you don't want to shut off your summoning star. You want to be using your summoning star turn 2. But having, like I mentioned, there are so many decks right now with have abilities and really rely on abilities. So having a Path to Peak can really slow down some archetypes. People like Gardevoir, people like Chien-Pao, heck, even the likes of Charizard, they're not expecting Lugia players to play a Path to Peak. They're expecting them to have a really good matchup into it. So having that Path to Peak is a really good option here. One thing I found very interesting in this list, there's only 1 therapeutic energy, but 3 Snorlaxes. So they're okay having a Snorlax being asleep for potentially 1 or 2 turns because they're playing 4 copies of Jet Energy. That's most like their strategy with it. But they play high disruptive cards with 4 bosses, 3 Ionas, and 2 research as well, and 1 Banette to really help get those 4 Archeopses in the discard pile. I like the 2 Lumineon, that's kind of a staple right now with Lugia. I like the Luxray, I like the Drapion. Honestly, this list is really, really interesting. There's also another list right now, which I saw, which I was going to cover as well, which plays like of Arvin and Bravery Charm on Snorlaxes. So you can easily search your deck for your Arvin and potentially even the Ultra Ball to get your Lugia V-Star under Path to Peak as well. Potentially could be a way around it. So honestly, really interesting version, and Lugia is definitely an archetype which is constantly evolving and much stronger of the colors build over in Japan than the single strike version. Miraidon EX is constantly being evolving as well. I think after the World Championships, people have really recognized that the Path to Peak build is the strongest build right now here. Having a disruptive capability, you don't rely too much on abilities after the first or second turn, so it's kind of fine to do as one. It's very similar to the likes of Andrew Mahone's one, but they are playing one copy of the other Miraidon EX. This is not too bad. It is your free retreat option, where it's 150 damage, and you get to NG Accelerate for your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. This is really good, especially if you play a huge Raichu or you kind of need to NG Accelerate its way here. I generally think it's quite a nice sort of key attacker in this one here. There are one less energy, there's less Forest Hill Stones, but honestly, this is still a really, really powerful archetype. Very disruptive to likes of the high boss counts and Iono and Judge, and even having a high count of Arvin to try and get that Forest Hill Stone and the multiple any generators and any item cards you play around here. Miraidon X definitely potentially could see a big return. People really like Miraidon. It's already done well over in Japan. So could we see Miraidon like second coming with a like of the Path to Peak Judge option? But speaking of Path to Peak Judge, DTE Mew may see a return. As you have mentioned, abilities are everywhere. And that potentially could be the return of DT Mew. None of the decks really have been playing them. Drapion only like really likes of Lost Zone Box, and Lugia are playing Drapion. Spiritomb is kind of like all but faded away right now. People aren't playing Mew as often, but the DTE build has finally found its place here. It plays a new Grab Hook from 151, which gets you put a Pokemon from your opponent's hand at the bottom of the deck. I really like this one. I like the Box of Disaster in this one. I like the high count Path to the Peak. I love the high counts of the Lost Vacuum. DTE Mew is finally potentially going to be here, and honestly, I'm really excited to see how it's going to develop. I think it's probably the right time for it to play right now, but a lot of people are thinking that, so that might be the case of people going like, so Charlie, if everyone's thinking about playing DTE Mew, wouldn't it be just best to like tech in a Spiritomb when there's easily have a good answer to it? Well, yes, but the amount of how much energy and ability disruption needs to be in the format, DTE Mew could really sneak in there, and I'm really excited to see how that deck is going to develop. Obviously, Mew does incredibly well in Asian tournaments. Obviously, we've got the tournament happening this weekend, so potentially we could see the return of DTE Mew. And to kind of wrap it up, let's look at Lost Zone Box here. Not too much has really changed. This list is still very generic for how Lost Zone Boxes kind of work right now. I like the Pokegear in this deck here. I think it's really, really key. You can get that from the likes of a Pokestop, and also then you can get that Get Your Chorus turn if you're going first. For your second turn, or potentially even that Clara in the late game here. I really like that inclusion in the deck here. Regard going back to the Drapion on this one, still like really respecting a Mew, and everything else here is very much about the same what you're going to see here. Maybe a bit less of the Super Rod, but you do play 2 copies of Clara. I really like this deck here. I think Lost Zone Box is still plays pretty okay overall in meta. It hasn't had that big sort of showing in quite a while. Still Lost Zone is still one of the best archetypes right now with the likes of even the Zard build and Giratina. So Lost Zone Box is kind of falling a little bit by the wayside, but still performing pretty well and having a very good win rate. So if we just look ahead here, could it in fact be Giratina's weekend over in Yokohama? I really hope it could be, because I really think Giratina needs that deserving. It's constantly been BDIF. I feel like for the last like couple months here, people have been like, Giratina is the best deck right now. I want to have its good placement. It did get a win, obviously, get the top 4 at World Championships. So Giratina is already up there being very, very powerful, but it needs to get that finals, get that win, return for Giratina V-Star. And more importantly, speaking of returns, DTE Mew could in fact return this weekend. Definitely seen that disruptive capability. So many decks right now play rule boxes and abilities. So shutting down the likes of Zard, Chien-Pao and Miraidon, Gardevoir, Arceus, Palkia, Radiant Greninja. The list carries on here. So Mew VMAX could really, really return it to DTE disruptive capability. And where was Zard placed in the event? I generally think Zard could in fact maybe even get a top 16 placement, depending on how the meta is evolving. If there's lots of Mew VMAXs in here, Zard potentially could be really, really powerful. The Lost Zone version may have a better option going into Mew, purely on the basis that it can kind of go around the Path to the Peak option by having the likes of just Energy Attachment and Mirage Gate as well. So generally, Zard could potentially do really well at the event if it hits the right matchup. So if you want to know what the best deck and format is right now, I would say it'd be Giratina, probably followed by likes of Chien-Pao, Charizard EX, and maybe even DTE Mew in the format right now. If it's been a really good meta right now, if you hit the right matchups, DTE Mew is 100% really up there as one of the best decks in format over in Japan. So I'm really excited to see how the format is going to develop this weekend. Potentially go see some of the new reveals as well. So I'm really, really excited for this weekend of tournaments. We get one in Japan as well as obviously one in America. So if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below, what deck do you think is going to take home Yokohama? Is it going to be Radiant is it going to be Charizard? Is it going to be Giratina? Or potentially could it be a rogue pick like Miraidon's done really well over in Japan, or even an Arceus and variant? So I hope you enjoyed this video. Next week, I'll obviously be covering the results, and I will see you guys then. Bye for now.